Have you ever woken up in a place that felt almost right, but completely wrong at the same time? Like when you're dreaming and you're in your childhood home, but the walls are the wrong color, and there's a door that was never there before? Well, buckle up, because today's story is going to mess with your head in the best possible way. What I'm about to tell you sounds like something straight out of a psychological thriller. But here's the thing. This actually happened to someone, and the details are so specific, so unsettling, that you're going to question everything you think you know about reality. I'm talking about waking up in your own apartment, except it's not your apartment at all. Same layout, same furniture placement, but everything else is just slightly off in the most disturbing way possible. Now, before we dive into this absolute mind-bender, let me tell you why this story has been keeping me up at night for weeks. See, I came across this account, buried deep in an online forum, and at first I thought it was just another creepypasta or some creative writing exercise, but the more I dug into it, the more I realized that this person was describing something that defies every logical explanation we have. We're talking about a situation that challenges the very fabric of what we consider normal reality. And listen, I know what you're thinking. This is probably just some elaborate hoax, or maybe the person was having some kind of psychological episode. But here's what makes this different. The level of detail, the consistency of the account, and the way this person describes their emotional state throughout the entire ordeal. It's either the most convincing piece of fiction I've ever encountered, or something genuinely inexplicable happened to this individual. So what exactly am I talking about here? Picture this. You go to sleep in your own bed, in your own apartment after a completely normal day. Nothing unusual happened. No strange dreams, no weird feelings. Just a regular Tuesday night. You wake up the next morning and everything looks exactly the same. Your bedroom is the same size, the windows are in the same place. Your furniture is arranged exactly how you left it. But then you notice the photos on your nightstand aren't of your family. They're of complete strangers. You think, okay, maybe I'm still dreaming, or maybe someone broke in and switched my photos as some kind of bizarre prank. But then you check your phone, and there's no signal, not even emergency calls. The time and date are correct, but every contact in your phone, every photo, every app, it's all different. Your social media accounts don't exist. Your email is full of messages from people you've never heard of, and your banking app shows an account that isn't yours. Now here's where it gets really weird. You look outside, and the view from your window is almost identical to what you remember. The building across the street is there. The little coffee shop on the corner is there. Even that weird tree with the bent branch is exactly where it should be. But the sky looks wrong. Not cloudy, not a different color, just wrong in a way that you can't quite put your finger on. Like someone tried to recreate the sky from memory, but got some fundamental detail incorrect. You might be thinking, well, obviously this person was having some kind of breakdown, or maybe they were the victim of an elaborate prank. But here's what makes this story so compelling. Every single detail they describe is consistent. The apartment isn't just similar to theirs, it's identical, down to the scratch on the kitchen counter and the stain on the bathroom ceiling. But it's populated with evidence of a completely different life. The refrigerator is full of food they don't remember buying, including items they're allergic to. The closet contains clothes that fit them perfectly, but in styles they would never choose. There are books on the shelves that they've never read, but somehow they know exactly what's inside when they flip through them. It's like living in a perfect replica of your life, but it's someone else's life entirely. And this is where the story gets really unsettling, because our protagonist didn't just accept this weird situation and move on. They started investigating. They went through every drawer, every cabinet, every piece of mail trying to figure out what was happening. What they found was a complete alternate version of their own existence. Same name, same birthday, same social security number, but a completely different history. According to the documents in this not apartment, they had a different job, worked for a different company, had different friends and family members. There were photos of birthday parties and holidays and vacations that they had never experienced, but somehow felt familiar, like memories that belonged to someone else, but were trying to attach themselves to their consciousness. The really disturbing part is that when they tried to contact their real family, their real friends, the phone numbers didn't work. The people they called had never heard of them. It was like their original life had been completely erased and replaced with this alternate version. But here's the kicker: they could remember both versions. They could remember their real life, and they could also remember fragments of this other life, like two sets of memories occupying the same space in their head. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie, or maybe the result of some kind of psychological condition. But the way this person describes their experience, the emotional weight of it, the genuine confusion and terror in their account, it's either incredibly convincing acting or something truly bizarre happened to them. They describe spending hours staring at family photos of people they didn't recognize, but who somehow felt familiar. They talk about finding a diary written in their own handwriting describing events they had never experienced. They mention discovering that their reflection looked slightly different, like someone had made tiny adjustments to their appearance that were almost imperceptible, but definitely there. The most chilling part of their account is when they describe trying to leave the apartment. They could open the door no problem, but when they stepped outside into the hallway, it was exactly like their real apartment building. But all the apartment numbers were different. The neighbors they passed in the hallway looked at them with recognition and said hello, like they knew them. But they were complete strangers. They tried to take the elevator down to the lobby, but when the doors opened, they were on a different floor, entirely. The building had the same layout, the same design, but it was somehow bigger, with more floors and more apartments. When they finally made it to the lobby, the doorman greeted them by name and asked how their weekend was, even though they had never seen this person before in their life. This is where I have to pause and ask you to really think about what you would do in this situation. How would you react if you woke up in a world that was almost exactly like your own, but fundamentally different in ways that no one else seemed to notice? Would you try to convince people that something was wrong? Would you try to find a way back to your real life? Or would you start to question your own sanity? Because that's exactly what happened to our protagonist. They started to wonder if maybe they were having some kind of psychotic break, or if they had been in an accident and were experiencing some kind of elaborate hallucination. But the problem was that everything felt completely real. They could touch things, smell things, taste things, and it all felt exactly like reality should feel. The story gets even more complex when they discover that this alternate version of their life isn't necessarily worse than their real life. In fact, in some ways, it's better. They have more money in this version, they live in a nicer apartment. They seem to have more friends and a more successful career. But it's not their life, and that knowledge creates a constant sense of displacement and unease. So what do you think is happening here? Are we dealing with some kind of parallel universe situation where someone accidentally slipped from one reality to another? Is this a psychological condition that creates incredibly vivid and consistent false memories? Or is there something else entirely going on, something that challenges our basic understanding of how reality works? They tried documenting everything, taking photos of the strange family pictures and the unfamiliar belongings. But here's where it gets really messed up. When they looked at the photos they had just taken on their phone, everything appeared normal. The strange family photos showed their real family. The unfamiliar clothes looked like their actual wardrobe, and the weird food in the fridge appeared to be exactly what they remembered buying. It was like the camera was showing them what should be there, rather than what they were actually seeing with their own eyes. But wait, it gets worse. They decided to test this by writing down everything they observed about this alternate apartment. They made detailed notes about the strange books, the unfamiliar photos, the different food, everything that was wrong. But when they looked back at their notes just minutes later, the writing had changed. Instead of describing the weird alternate reality they were experiencing, their own handwriting now described their normal apartment with all their normal belongings. This is when they started to panic, because now they couldn't even trust their own documentation. Every attempt to record evidence of what was happening to them was being somehow altered or corrected. They tried recording voice memos, but when they played them back, they heard themselves describing their normal life. They tried taking videos, but the footage showed their regular apartment, not this strange, alternate version. The psychological impact of this situation is something I can't even imagine. Think about it. You're living in a reality that you know is wrong, but you can't prove it to anyone, not even to yourself, through documentation. Everyone around you treats you like you belong in this alternate life, but you have clear memories of a completely different existence. It's like being trapped in someone else's dream while being fully conscious that it's not your dream. And here's what really gets me about this whole situation. They describe feeling homesick for their real life, but being unable to articulate exactly what they were missing. How do you explain to someone that the life they're living isn't actually theirs, when all the evidence suggests otherwise? How do you convince people that you're living in the wrong reality, when that reality seems to be actively working against your attempts to prove it? They started paying attention to small details, trying to catch this alternate reality in inconsistencies. They noticed that certain conversations felt scripted, like people were saying things they were supposed to say, rather than having natural interactions. They observed that some of their supposed friends seemed to know things about their preferences and history that they themselves didn't remember sharing. The most disturbing observation was about their own behavior. They found themselves responding to situations in ways that felt automatic, like they were following a script they didn't remember learning. When neighbors asked about their weekend, they would automatically respond with details about activities they didn't remember doing. When coworkers referenced shared experiences, they would nod along, even though they had no memory of those events. It was like their body and their mouth knew how to navigate this alternate life, even though their consciousness was completely disconnected from it. They describe feeling like a passenger in their own life, watching themselves live someone else's existence, while being powerless to change course. Now here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. They started noticing that other people seemed to be experiencing similar disconnects. They would catch fleeting expressions of confusion on strangers' faces, or hear fragments of conversations that suggested other people were also questioning their reality. But whenever they tried to approach these people or bring up their observations, the moment would pass, and everyone would return to their normal scripted interactions. They began to wonder if they were part of some larger phenomenon, where multiple people were living in realities that didn't quite match their memories. Maybe they weren't alone in this experience. Maybe there were others who were also trapped in lives that felt familiar, but fundamentally wrong. The really scary part is that they started to notice their memories of their real life beginning to fade, not all at once, but gradually, like someone was slowly turning down the volume on their authentic experiences while turning up the volume on this alternate existence. They would try to remember specific details about their real family, their real job, their real friends, but the memories were becoming hazier and less distinct. Meanwhile, the memories of this alternate life were becoming more vivid and detailed. They could remember conversations and experiences from this other existence with crystal clarity, even though they knew they had never actually lived through them. It was like their brain was being slowly reprogrammed to accept this new reality as their authentic experience. This gradual shift in their memory and perception created a terrifying possibility. What if they eventually forgot their real life entirely? What if they became completely integrated into this alternate existence without any memory of their original reality? Would they still be the same person, or would they essentially become someone else entirely? The psychological horror of this situation is that they were watching their own identity slowly dissolve and being replaced with someone else's life, while being fully aware that it was happening but powerless to stop it. They describe feeling like they were drowning in someone else's existence, while their true self was being erased bit by bit. And this brings us to the question that's been haunting me since I first read this account. If someone's memories can be gradually replaced, if their entire reality can be swapped out for an alternate version without anyone else noticing, what does that say about the nature of identity and consciousness? Are we just the sum of our memories and experiences, or is there something deeper that makes us who we are? The most unsettling part of their story is what happened when they tried to contact someone, anyone who might remember their real life. They called their mother's phone number, the one they had memorized since childhood, but a stranger answered. Not just any stranger, but someone who seemed genuinely confused about why they were calling and asking about people who didn't exist. They tried calling their best friend from college, the person they had shared countless memories with over the years. The number was disconnected. They looked up their friend on social media and found no trace that this person had ever existed. It was like their entire social network had been wiped clean and replaced with relationships they had never formed. But here's what really messed with their head when they looked at their phone contacts. All the numbers were there. Their mom's contact, their best friend's contact, their coworkers, everyone. But when they called these numbers, they reached completely different people who all seemed to know them intimately and expected them to know details about shared experiences they had never had. The person who answered their mom's contact talked to them like they were her child, asked about their health, mentioned family events that had never happened, but somehow felt familiar. The voice was different. The personality was different. But the love and concern in the tone was exactly what they remembered from their real mother. This is where the story becomes genuinely heartbreaking, because they describe feeling like they had lost everyone they had ever loved while being surrounded by people who claimed to love them. They were grieving relationships that had apparently never existed while being expected to maintain relationships with people who were essentially strangers. They started keeping a secret journal written in code to try to preserve their memories of their real life. They would write down specific details about their actual family, their real friends, their authentic experiences, anything they could remember before those memories faded completely. But even this became problematic because they would sometimes catch themselves writing down details from this alternate life as if they were real memories. The boundary between their authentic memories and these false ones was becoming increasingly blurred. They would remember their real father teaching them to ride a bike, but they would also remember this alternate father doing the same thing in a different location with different details. Both memories felt equally real and equally false at the same time. What makes this story so compelling is that they never found a clear explanation for what was happening to them. There was no moment of revelation, no discovery of some scientific experiment or supernatural phenomenon that explained their situation. They just had to learn to live with the constant uncertainty of not knowing which reality was real, or if either of them was real. They described developing a kind of double consciousness, where they could function in this alternate life, while maintaining awareness that it wasn't their authentic existence. They learned to respond appropriately to the people and situations in this reality, while internally grieving for the life they had lost. The really disturbing part is that they started to notice small glitches in this alternate reality. Sometimes people would repeat conversations word for word. Sometimes they would catch glimpses of their real reflection in mirrors before it would shift back to this alternate version. Sometimes they would find objects in their apartment that belonged to their real life, mixed in with the belongings of this alternate existence. These glitches gave them hope that maybe their real life was still out there somewhere. Maybe this alternate reality was just a temporary overlay that could be removed or reversed. But they also made them question whether they were losing their sanity, whether these glimpses of their authentic life were actually hallucinations brought on by the stress of their situation. The story ends without resolution, because honestly, how could it end? They're still living in this alternate reality, still maintaining their double consciousness, still hoping that someday they might find their way back to their authentic existence. But they're also starting to accept that this might be their new normal, that they might never fully understand what happened to them or why. And that's what makes this story so unsettling, because it doesn't offer any comfort or explanation. It just presents us with the terrifying possibility that our reality might not be as solid or permanent as we think it is. That maybe we're all just one strange morning away from waking up in a life that looks exactly like ours, but belongs to someone else entirely. So the next time you wake up in your own bed, in your own room, take a moment to really look around. Check the photos on your nightstand. Make sure your reflection looks right. Verify that your phone contacts are who you think they are. Because if this story teaches us anything, it's that the line between reality and something else entirely might be thinner than we ever imagined. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that could actually happen to any of us. Sleep tight, and I'll see you in the next one.